Imagine being 21 years old. You're completely unproven. You're barely a year out of undergrad, and you've just been dropped into this freezing city in the American Midwest, Cleveland, to be exact.
Okay, just right into the deep end.
Right. And you are living out of a corporate hotel entirely by yourself, and your mission, you have to fix a broken $200 million division of a Fortune 500 company.
Which is just absurd when you really think about it.
It's completely absurd. I mean, you have zero on-the-ground supervision. The environment inside that company is inherently skeptical, right? The executives there, their actual livelihoods depend on this division, and they are outright hostile to your presence.
Oh, they hate you. They absolutely hate that you're there.
Exactly. Yet your single mandate from the people who sent you there is simply make the firm look good. And if you fail, massive billion-dollar corporate decisions go completely awry. Factories might close, thousands of jobs could be restructured.
It is the ultimate high-wire act without a net. And, what's truly compelling here is that this scenario is not some bizarre corporate anomaly. It's not a hazing ritual gone wrong.
Right.
This is the deliberate, highly engineered reality of the global corporate machinery. I mean, it's a system that's literally designed to strip away the weak and forge a very specific type of analytical weapon.
And that brings us to the core mission of this deep dive, because today we are unpacking a massive 8-hour masterclass on what the industry calls case interviews.
Yeah, the legendary case interview.
Right. And this material comes straight from the inside of elite management consulting. We're talking about the exact, rigorous intellectual frameworks utilized by firms like, McKinsey, Bain, the Boston Consulting Group.
The big three.
The big three, yeah. We are talking about the invisible architecture behind global business here. These are the individuals who advise the world's most powerful CEOs, sovereign wealth funds, entire governments.
Literally shaping the global economy.
Yeah. Exactly. So we aren't just looking at how people land these coveted, super lucrative positions. We are decoding how they are systematically trained to think about complex global problems, the allocation of capital, and ultimately the dynamics of power.
And to really understand that invisible architecture, you have to examine the raw material these firms select to build it. And more importantly, the psychological gauntlet they force that raw material through, because they have to ensure it can withstand the pressure of the global economy.
Which is immense.
It's staggering. Management consultants are essentially the analytical engine behind the most consequential decisions made in business today. Like, if an automotive giant decides to pivot entirely to electric vehicles or a massive pharma company acquires a rival, there is almost always an elite consulting team in the background, running those models.
I want to start with the sheer barrier to entry into this world, because the math, I was looking at the source material, the math is frankly staggering.
It really is.
You have this pool of applicants from the most elite institutions on the planet, right? Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, the IITs in India. These are already the top 1% of academic achievers. What does the actual filtration pipeline look like when these firms go on a hiring sweep?
Well, the filtration process is absolute. It is ruthless. If you take a top-tier institution, let's just use Stanford as the baseline, you might have, say, 400 highly qualified, incredibly intelligent applicants submitting their resumes for a single recruiting cycle.
400 kids who have basically never failed at anything.
Exactly. Apex-level students. And out of those 400, maybe 4 to 6 will actually receive an offer.
Wow. 4 to 6 out of 400?
Right. Worldwide, an elite Tier 1 firm might hire just 100 analysts in a given year across all their global offices. From London to Dubai to Singapore, just 100 people.
That already sounds like an impossible bottleneck. I mean, you're taking valedictorians and rejecting 98% of them. But the twist here, the part that genuinely surprised me when looking at the sources, is what happens to the people who actually win the lottery and get hired.
Yeah, because the initial hiring is really just the first filter.
Right. So what happens next?
2 years later, out of those 100 globally selected elite minds, 90 are pushed out.
Wait, 90%?
90%. The industry uses polite terminology, like they were counseled out or encouraged to explore other opportunities. But the reality is that it's a systematic, institutionalized purge.
That is insane.
Only 10 out of that original global 100 are promoted to the associate level and actually invited to step onto the partner track.
Okay, let's just pause and dissect the logic of that for a second, because I am really struggling to understand why any rational enterprise would spend millions of dollars recruiting the absolute smartest minds on the planet, only to intentionally churn through 90% of that talent in 24 months.
It seems totally counterproductive, right?
Yeah. From a pure human resources perspective, that looks like a catastrophic failure of retention. There has to be some deeper structural force driving this behavior.
Well, it looks like a failure only if you view it through the lens of a traditional corporate career ladder. But elite consulting operates on a completely different geometric model. It's a strict pyramid. They often refer to it as the leverage model.
Okay, break that down for me.
So at the top, you have a very small number of partners who actually sell the engagements to the clients. At the bottom, you have this massive base of analysts and associates doing the analytical heavy lifting. To maintain the economics of that pyramid, you must have high turnover at the base.
Interesting.
But beyond just the geometry of the workforce, this churn is really driven by a fundamental daily conflict between fees and resources.
Yeah.
I mean, elite consulting firms charge astronomically high fees.
How high are we talking?
A single partner's time might be billed out at $10,000 or $15,000 a day.
A day. Just for one person.
Just for the partner. So a small team can easily cost a client millions of dollars for just a few months of work.
Which raises a really interesting point, because clients, even massive multinational corporations with deep pockets, they fundamentally despise paying those high fees. I mean, a CEO doesn't write a $2 million check to McKinsey with a smile on their face.
Well, they absolutely do not. The clients are constantly pushing back against the scope of the contract. A CEO or corporate board will look at the proposal and say, we see your proposal. If this market entry analysis is scheduled to take 8 weeks, we need you to compress it into 6.
They want the same work in less time.
Exactly. They'll say, if your pricing model assumes a 4-person case team, you need to deliver the exact same quality with a 3-person team. The client is always trying to squeeze every drop of value out of the engagement.
So as a structural result, the resources the firm actually has to deploy are constantly under siege.
That is the daily lived reality. The consultants actually doing the work on the ground are caught in a vice. They are staring down a mandate to execute the workload of 5 people with only a 3-person team, all while the timeline shrinks.
That sounds like a recipe for total burnout.
It is. And it goes further than just the contracted work, too. If a firm is dealing with a new client or attempting to penetrate a new sector, say they're moving from traditional banking into fintech, they often over-deliver just to prove their worth.
Like giving away free samples.
Right, but they won't officially discount the fee because that cheapens the brand. Instead, they'll throw in an extra strategic analysis or an additional competitive teardown for free.
But I'm guessing they don't hire extra people to do that free work.
Nope. They simply force the existing, already compressed team to absorb the extra hours. The margin for error is 0, and the pressure is just relentless.
Okay, so keeping that intense pressure and those really tight margins in mind, let's circle back to our cold open. That 21-year-old sitting in a hotel room in Cleveland. If the financial margins are this precarious and the client's expectations are stratospheric, why on earth would a global consulting firm let an unproven, newly minted graduate anywhere near a $200 million corporate problem?
It seems crazy.
It strikes me as a wildly unjustifiable risk. I mean, you are handing the keys of a Formula One car to someone who just got their learner's permit.
It is a profound risk. And it introduces a vital internal metric that they use. The concept of the billing rate.
The billing rate.
Yeah. Inside the hidden economy of these firms, every single employee has a per diem rate. It's this internal calculus of what the analyst is worth, what the manager is worth, and what the partner is worth.
Okay.
When a fresh college graduate is assigned to their first project, their actual functional worth to the case team manager is essentially negative.
Wait, negative value. And that implies they aren't just unhelpful, they're actively detrimental to the operation.
They are a liability.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. A manager whose own career depends on flawless execution does not want a first-year associate on their team. The new hire requires training, they require double-checking, and most importantly, they consume the manager's most precious resource, which is time.
Right, because the manager's already doing the work of 2 people.
Exactly. So the firm often has to force these new hires onto case teams. Sometimes they literally give their time away to the client for free in the initial weeks, just to get them reps.
Just to get them some practice.
Yeah. Because the ultimate test of this entire apparatus, the only variable that determines if you survive that 90% purge we talked about, is whether you can achieve absolute independence.
It sounds akin to throwing a junior surgeon into an operating room and just walking away. I mean, the interview process, which we are going to break down, seems like it's designed entirely around mitigating that specific risk.
Um, that is the perfect way to frame it, actually. When an applicant sits down for a case interview, they're subjected to grueling math questions and complex logic puzzles. But the math is largely a smokescreen.
Really? A smokescreen?
Yeah. The interviewer, who is a senior working consultant taking time out of their own crushing schedule, by the way, is sitting across the table evaluating one singular question.
Which is?
Can I drop you off at the regional headquarters of a Fortune 500 company completely by yourself with little to no supervision? Will you be able to face an aggressive, skeptical client, structure the problem, and not detonate the firm's reputation in the process?
So it's entirely about trust. Like, am I going to ruin my own career by trusting you to speak on behalf of the firm?
That is the threshold. In the Cleveland scenario detailed in our sources, this young consultant was living at the Ritz-Carlton on the client's dime, still paying exorbitant New York rent for an empty apartment back home and seeing their manager perhaps one day a week.
And the rest of the time?
The rest of the time, they were completely isolated in a hostile corporate environment with a painfully vague directive. Just, the division is broken. Fix it.
Wow.
If an individual cannot operate effectively in that sheer void of instruction, they will not last.
I want to explore that void for a second, because you are dropped into a massive corporate entity. A Fortune 500 company doesn't just have a few spreadsheets, right? They have terabytes of historical data, millions of customer records, decades of supply chain logs.
Oceans of data.
Yeah, oceans. A young consultant staring down a $200 million problem could easily spend 3 years just reading the available documents. How do they handle that scale of information without immediately drowning?
They survive through the rigorous application of artificial constraints. They actively avoid most of the information.
They avoid it.
Yeah. And this brings us to a foundational doctrine in elite consulting. It's a phrase you will hear repeated ad nauseum in those corridors. Do not boil the ocean.
I love that phrase, do not boil the ocean. I really want to unpack this thoroughly.
So if you require a single cup of hot water, you have two theoretical methods to acquire it. The logical, efficient method is to take 1 cup of water, place it in a kettle, and heat it.
Makes sense.
The absurd method is to attempt to heat the entire planet's ocean to its boiling point and then scoop out your 1 cup.
Right. Which would be impossible.
One method yields a quick result, the other is a catastrophic, impossible waste of energy.
So in the context of global business, the ocean represents the client's complete, unfettered database. Every email, every transaction, every customer demographic.
Precisely. A novice, untrained analyst walks into a corporation, and their instinct is to say, give me access to everything. I want to build a comprehensive model of the entire enterprise before I make a decision.
Because they want to be thorough.
Exactly. But recall the structural tension we mapped out earlier. The client has squeezed your timeline from 8 weeks to 6. You do not have the temporal or financial runway to run every possible permutation of the data. The objective is not to find absolute omniscient truth. The objective is to find the minimum viable data required to make an actionable decision.
This tension between academic perfectionism and corporate practicality is, I think, one of the most fascinating things here, because there is a highly specific anecdote from the source material regarding an applicant from the IIT, the Indian Institutes of Technology, that perfectly illustrates this clash of paradigms.
Oh, this is a great example. So the IIT system is arguably the most rigorous technical educational pipeline in the world. Out of over 1 billion people in India, the acceptance rates are astronomically low.
It's harder to get into than MIT.
Way harder. They filter for the absolute sharpest quantitative minds. And the applicant in this specific interview scenario was ranked #1 in his class in physics at the IIT. We are talking about an individual with a genuinely world-class computationally dominant brain.
So this individual, armed with an intellect capable of unraveling quantum mechanics, sits down for the case interview. And the consultant across the table asks him a seemingly pedestrian business question, right? They ask, how do you figure out what a customer wants?
Right. And because of his intense academic conditioning, his mind immediately defaults to the most complex, precise, and theoretically rigorous solution imaginable.
What does he say?
He outlines a strategy that involves tracking customer movements, using advanced radio frequency technology,
Mhm.
mapping out their GPS coordinates as they move through a retail environment, and then feeding that geospatial data into a massive Poisson distribution algorithm to precisely mathematically model their behavioral desires.
Okay, just for the sake of our listeners, a Poisson distribution is a statistical concept used to shape how many times an event is likely to occur over a specified period. I mean, it's brilliant math, it's
It
genius.
is genius.
But what was the answer the McKinsey or Bain interviewer was actually waiting for?
The answer they wanted was jump on a plane, fly to the client's location, go ask the customers what they want, and come back to the office this afternoon.
That is devastatingly simple. It's almost anti-intellectual at first glance.
It feels that way to an academic.
But it highlights a profound disconnect. Because if you are an aerospace engineer designing the propulsion system for a commercial airliner, your math cannot be off by even a fraction of a percent. If it is, the plane falls out of the sky and people die. 3 significant digits of precision are absolutely mandatory.
Right, but corporate strategy operates in a different physical universe entirely.
How so?
Corporate strategy operates in the realm of probability and threshold, not absolute precision. You are rarely searching for a perfect number. You're searching for a directional mandate.
Give me a concrete example of that.
Sure. Let's say a global consumer goods company has a strict internal hurdle rate. They will only greenlight the manufacturing of a new product if it projects a guaranteed 50% gross margin. If the math shows anything less than 50%, the project is instantly killed.
Okay, so a proposal for a new line of, I don't know, smart appliances lands on your desk as the consultant.
You have 2 choices. You can spend $200,000 of the client's money and 8 weeks of your team's time building a hyper-complex financial model that calculates supply chain fluctuations in Taiwan, currency exchange rates in Europe, and raw material costs down to the penny.
Which is boiling the ocean.
Exactly. Or you can do rough back-of-the-napkin math. You estimate the absolute maximum premium price the market will bear. You ballpark the obvious manufacturing and shipping costs based on historical data, and you realize very quickly, wait, even in a best-case scenario, this product is only going to generate roughly a 20% margin.
Which isn't even in the same hemisphere as the 50% requirement.
It's not even close. Now, you do not know if the true ultimate margin is exactly 21.3% or 19.8%.
But it doesn't matter.
It simply does not matter. The brilliant consultant realizes that the rough estimate is so far below the required threshold that you already possess all the information necessary to make the actionable decision. You kill the project immediately.
You just saved the client 8 weeks and hundreds of thousands of dollars by refusing to over-engineer the analysis.
Exactly.
It really requires a complete rewiring of how high achievers define intelligence. I mean, intelligence in this world isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing exactly what you can afford to ignore.
Which is a very hard lesson for smart people to learn.
Yeah. And by the way, if you value this kind of deep, unvarnished breakdown of how elite corporate power and decision-making actually function behind closed doors, make sure you are subscribed to the deep dive. We constantly dissect these hidden global frameworks, and sharing this deep dive with a colleague who geeks out on strategic thinking is the absolute best way to support the show.
Yeah, because that rewiring of intelligence is precisely what breaks so many brilliant candidates during the interview.
You just can't let go of the precision.
No, they are deeply frustrated by the lack of precision. They are conditioned by 20 years of schooling to find the one singular right answer. But in the theater of management consulting, an answer that is mathematically flawless but takes 6 months to discover or costs $1 million to verify is fundamentally a wrong answer. Time and capital are the ultimate constraints.
So we've established the harsh economics of the environment. We've established how they filter out the noise and refuse to boil the ocean. I want to transition into the actual execution phase.
Okay.
The deep analysis of how a consultant operates when they are finally in the room with the decision makers. The source material outlines 3 core rules, like an ironclad psychological framework that governs the consultant mindset.
Yes. The first rule is the absolute bedrock of their professional existence.
Yeah.
It's often right, never without data-driven justification.
Meaning you never, under any circumstances, open your mouth to make a claim without a verifiable basis, in fact, to support it.
Never. The level of scrutiny these individuals operate under is difficult for most people to really comprehend. If you state an opinion as a fact in a high-stakes meeting, and a client pushes back and proves you wrong, you don't just look personally foolish.
Right.
You permanently damage the credibility of the entire case team. You jeopardize a multi-million-dollar contract, and you tarnish the brand of the global firm. The firm's entire value proposition is that they possess rigorous, objective truth.
The source material paints an incredibly vivid picture to illustrate this. We are talking about a Fortune 25 boardroom. You have a 21 or 22-year-old analyst sitting in a cavernous room centered around a massive mahogany table designed to seat 70 people.
Yeah, just imagine the intimidation factor there.
It's wild. The space is so expansive that every single chair is equipped with its own microphone because human acoustics physically cannot carry a voice from one end of the table to the other.
And occupying those seats are the lead clients, the titans of global industry. You're looking at executives who have survived 30 years of vicious corporate warfare to reach the C-suite.
Right.
The psychological weight, the sheer gravity of every single syllable spoken into that microphone is crushing. The senior partner or manager is sitting next to the young consultant silently praying, "Please do not say anything stupid."
I think we need to define stupid in this context, though. Because in a normal conversation, stupid means illogical or foolish. But here, it means something very specific.
In this context, stupid simply means making an assertion you cannot immediately, definitively back up with empirical data. This is exactly why consultants are notoriously famous for hedging their language.
Right. They never commit.
You will rarely hear a consultant deal in absolutes unless they are physically holding the spreadsheet. They use phrases like, "based on our initial market sizing," or "the current data suggests."
And if they don't have the data,
If they have a strategic intuition but no numbers to support it, they will explicitly quarantine that thought. They'll say, "I want to be clear that I am just hypothesizing here," but they build a firewall around their opinions.
let's play out a scenario. What happens if a powerful, intimidating CEO leans across that mahogany table, looks directly at the 22-year-old consultant, and asks a direct, complex question about a market trend, and the consultant genuinely does not know the answer?
Well, a novice might try to guess, right? Or they might try to construct a clever theory on the fly to avoid looking ignorant.
Which is human nature.
Exactly. But an elite consultant does the exact opposite. They hold the CEO's gaze and confidently, without a hint of shame, state, "I have no idea."
Wow, I have no idea.
Yeah. And they can say that with absolute certainty because they have categorized their knowledge base. They know exactly what facts they possess, and they know what facts they do not. The lack of data is just another data point to them.
That takes a lot of discipline.
It does. And they will usually follow it up with, "But I will build a model and have the exact figure on your desk by 8:00 a.m. tomorrow." It is a discipline of radical factual honesty.
I want to aggressively challenge this premise, though.
Okay, go for it.
Let's say you do have the data. You have run the numbers, you have avoided boiling the ocean, you haven't guessed, and, with absolute mathematical certainty, exactly what the company needs to do to avoid bankruptcy. Isn't being factually right the only thing that ultimately matters? If the building is on fire, does it matter how I tell you to use the exit?
That's a great question. In a pure, frictionless academic setting, yes, being right is sufficient. In the complex, ego-driven, highly political world of global business consulting, absolutely not.
Why not?
Because being right is only 50% of the job. And that brings us to the second, arguably more difficult rule. You must be meticulously client-friendly.
The source material uses a brilliant analogy here involving a brain surgeon. Let's walk through that.
Yeah, this perfectly illustrates it. Imagine you walk into a hospital clinic.
Yeah.
A brain surgeon you have never met before walks into the room. He does not introduce himself. He hasn't ordered an MRI. He hasn't looked at your medical chart, and he hasn't taken your blood pressure. He simply glances at you from across the room and declares, "I have terrible news. You are dying. I need to take you into emergency brain surgery in the next 2 hours, or you will not survive the night."
I would immediately walk out the door. I would demand a second opinion. I'd refuse the surgery outright.
Almost any rational human being would. You would say, "There is zero chance you are cutting into my skull without proving to me why it's necessary."
Right.
But here is the critical, terrifying quirk of human psychology at the core of this analogy. Your visceral reaction to reject the surgery is completely independent of whether or not the doctor is medically correct.
Wait, so he could actually be right. He might be a savant who visually spotted the physical manifestations of a looming aneurysm.
He could be 100% objectively correct. If you leave, you might die. But because he delivered his conclusion without showing his work, without explaining the why, in a manner that you could comprehend, process, and trust, you reject the life-saving solution.
That's fascinating.
You will literally choose fatal consequences over accepting a correct answer presented in an arrogant, alienating, or opaque way.
That is a staggering insight into human nature. And you're saying this exact dynamic dictates the multi-billion-dollar consulting industry?
It governs every single interaction. If a consulting team walks into a Fortune 500 company and flatly announces your supply chain is bloated, you need to lay off 12,000 people in your European division and completely divest your legacy manufacturing assets, the executive team will reject the proposal.
Even if the math is flawless.
Even if the math is flawless, even if the company will go bankrupt in 3 years without the intervention, they will reject it because the consultants did not walk them through the data step by step to build consensus.
This perfectly explains why brilliant, visionary entrepreneurs, the self-made billionaires who disrupt entire industries, often make utterly catastrophic management consultants.
Exactly. A billionaire founder operates on rapid instinct, gut intuition, and unilateral authority. When Steve Jobs or Elon Musk makes a decision, they do not have to build a PowerPoint deck to explain their mental leaps to a client. They just dictate the outcome.
Right, they just say do it.
But a consultant has zero actual authority. Their only power is influence. They have to bring the client along for the entire intellectual journey.
Because if you make the client feel unintelligent,
If the CEO of a $70 billion enterprise feels dumb in front of their own board of directors because a 25-year-old consultant jumped from point A to point F without explicitly explaining points B, C, D, and E, that consulting firm is getting fired.
the ego is that fragile.
The CEO's ego and political standing within the company are paramount. You must cater to the client's capacity to understand.
So how do you operationalize that? How do you ensure a complex financial restructure is understood by a CEO whose background might be in marketing or sales, not investment banking? The source material breaks down the cognitive styles of learning in a way that I found genuinely revelatory.
Yeah, it requires a fundamental understanding of human cognition. Roughly 1/3 of the population are what we call abstract learners. You can give them pure verbal or mathematical instructions like picture a three-dimensional sphere rotated 35 degrees on its axis and calculate the displacement, and they can manipulate that concept entirely within the dark theater of their mind.
And consultants are usually abstract learners.
Management consultants, by the very nature of the hiring filter we discussed, heavily index as extreme abstract thinkers.
But the executives they are advising generally do not.
Correct. The other 2/3 of the population are either visual learners who need to see a chart or a map, or experiential learners who learn by physically doing. If you hand an experiential learner a physical puzzle, they will solve it by twisting the pieces. If you try to explain the puzzle's algorithm to them verbally, their eyes will just glaze over.
The implication here is massive. If you have engineered a brilliant, data-driven, mathematically perfect solution, but you cannot translate it visually, like if you can't draw the logic tree out on a whiteboard or map it on graph paper so a visual learner can physically see the structural logic, your brilliant answer is actually a bad answer.
It is worse than bad. It is useless because the client cannot internalize it. And if a massive corporate bureaucracy cannot internalize an idea, they cannot execute it.
So that's why they use PowerPoint so much.
This is exactly why the industry is obsessed with slide decks and visual frameworks. It isn't just about making things look pretty. It is an exercise in cognitive translation. It's about packaging the answer in a format that respects the client's specific neurological style of processing information.
Which provides a seamless conceptual link to the third rule. We have the mandate for data-driven justification. We have the requirement for client-friendly cognitive translation. Rule number 3 is, to use the blunt terminology of the industry, the no asshole rule.
Yes, a concept widely popularized by a Stanford Business School professor, but internalized deeply by consulting firms. And it is not about being polite for the sake of manners. It is a critical, tactical survival metric.
The source material provides this incredible anecdote about a dynamic between a 67-year-old industry veteran client and a very young consultant. You have to put yourself in the shoes of that client to understand the inherent friction. I mean, you have been in the heavy machinery industry for 4 decades. You know the smell of the factory floor.
Right.
And suddenly, some kid who was at a frat party 3 years ago is flown in to tell you how to optimize your life's work.
The animosity is almost guaranteed. That 67-year-old veteran is actively hunting for a reason to write the young consultant off. They're waiting for the kid to show a flash of arrogance, a hint of condescension.
Just one misstep.
Yeah, if you walk into that factory acting like an omniscient savior, you instantly trigger their defensive mechanisms. And more importantly, from a structural standpoint, you destroy the relationship.
And why is that relationship so functionally critical?
Because the consultant doesn't actually have the data. The client holds all the data.
Of course.
The veteran knows where the actual supply chain bottlenecks are hidden, which shift managers are lying about their numbers, and which machines are secretly failing. If you destroy the relationship through arrogance, you are starved of the informational oxygen you need to survive the case.
There is a highly specific story in the source material about a German consultant. He goes by the name Wolfgang, and the anecdote that perfectly encapsulates this friction.
Oh, Wolfgang.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wolfgang was a highly intelligent, intensely analytical consultant managing a case team in the American Midwest. He was the embodiment of German Sachlichkeit, a focus on objective, matter-of-fact efficiency.
Okay.
And he was deeply, visibly frustrated by the Midwestern corporate culture of small talk.
The mandatory 5 minutes of how was your weekend? How is the local sports team doing? Did you catch the game?
Exactly. To Wolfgang's hyper-optimized, process-driven brain, this was an agonizing inefficiency. He would vent to his team like, why are we spending 8 minutes talking about a golf game? We have a $200 million operational crisis to solve, and we're billing the client by the hour.
Wolfgang viewed the small talk as a glitch in the corporate software, like a bug that needed to be patched out so they could get to the data faster.
But the profound realization that Wolfgang lacked, and that his younger, more culturally adaptable American subordinates actually had to explain to him, is that the small talk is not a bug. The small talk is the operating system.
That's a great way to put it.
Cultural adaptation is a mandatory, non-negotiable professional skill. The younger consultant actually had to pull Wolfgang aside and coach him. They explained that asking a Midwestern factory manager, how was your weekend, is not a waste of time. It is the cryptographic key that unlocks the manager's willingness to cooperate.
Right.
If you want them to open the ledgers and show you where the bodies are buried, you have to play their social game.
It's the human toll bridge. You have to pay the social toll to get the data across. And eventually, Wolfgang adapted. He learned to artificially suppress his hyper-efficiency engine long enough to build that human bridge. Because without it, his analytical brilliance was totally neutered.
Precisely. So we've dissected the environment, the constraints, and the behavioral rules. I think we need to look at the future trajectory of this mindset. Like, how does a firm actually test a human being for these three distinct traits: data reliance, cognitive empathy, and cultural adaptability in a 45-minute interview setting?
Yeah, let's break down the actual mechanics of the case interview itself. The best way to contextualize the case interview, according to the source, is to contrast it with the famous Harvard Business School case study method.
The distinction is vital here. A classic Harvard Business School case study is an exercise in managing abundance. They hand you 20 or 30 pages of dense text. You get historical background, financial statements, competitor analyses, market trends.
Just a mountain of data.
Yeah. And the skill being tested is your ability to filter through the noise, identify the relevant data points, and synthesize a strategy. You are drowning in information.
But a consulting firm case interview operates on the exact opposite polarity. It is an exercise in managing scarcity. You get a blank slate. The interviewer looks at you and delivers a single sentence like, profits are down 20% at ABC Company over the last 3 quarters. What do you do?
And you have absolutely nothing else. No historical context, no geographic data, no product lines. You are simply dropped into the vacuum.
Which is terrifying.
It is, but it intentionally mimics the stark reality of a partner walking into a CEO's office. The CEO doesn't hand them a neatly curated 20-page packet. The CEO looks out the window, turns around, and says, my margins are evaporating, and I don't know why. Fix it.
So the core skill being tested in the case interview is not just how well you analyze data, it is your mechanical process for eliciting the right data out of the void. But where do you even begin when faced with that void? I mean, if I'm sitting in that chair, my heart rate is spiking, my palms are sweating, and my mind is racing in 100 directions at once.
There is a very specific, almost robotic sequence to opening a case that these candidates are trained to execute. The first step is totally counterintuitive. You stall.
You deliberately waste time. I love this. It's like a pilot running a pre-flight checklist while the engine is smoking. You force yourself to slow down.
Exactly that. You say something banal like, that is a very interesting situation. Let me take a moment to consider the parameters.
You're just buying time.
You are verbally buying yourself 5 to 10 seconds of silence to let the initial spike of adrenaline wash through your system. It allows your prefrontal cortex to regain control from the amygdala. If you simply stare in silence for 10 seconds, the interviewer assumes you are frozen in panic. By verbally claiming the pause, you project control.
Okay, and once you stabilize your heart rate, what is step 2?
Step 2 is to verify. You must explicitly verify your understanding of the facts and critically clarify any esoteric terminology.
Because different industries use completely different lexicons. What means one thing in tech means something entirely different in logistics.
Yes. The source material uses a brilliant trap word here, reinsurance. Let's say the interviewer states, a global reinsurance company has seen its premiums drop by 15%. If the candidate does not know exactly what reinsurance is but pretends they do to save face, they will fail the interview within the first 3 minutes.
You have to swallow your pride, expose your ignorance, and ask for the definition.
Yes. You say, before we proceed, can I clarify some background context? What exactly is the business model of a reinsurance company? And the interviewer will explain that it is essentially the insurance company for insurance companies. Entities like Munich Re or Swiss Re that take on the catastrophic risks, like a hurricane causing $5 billion in damage, that a local insurer cannot absorb alone.
Got it.
Then you must verify the next metric. You mentioned premiums are down. In this industry, does premium equate to profit or revenue? And the interviewer corrects you. A premium is the revenue. It is the top-line cash paid for the policy.
Oh, wow. That is a massive pivot. By simply verifying the terminology, you just realize the core problem is not about a declining profit margin, which could be a cost issue. It's strictly about declining top-line revenue. You just saved yourself from spending 20 minutes solving the entirely wrong problem.
Precisely. Once you have stalled and verified, you move to the third and most critical phase, structure. You have to impose a visual logical framework onto the chaos. If you have verified it as a profitability problem, you literally take out your notepad and draw a logic tree. Profits at the top, branching down into revenues on one side and costs on the other.
You are making the abstract thought process tangible.
And you ensure the interviewer sees it. A great candidate will physically shift their posture, perhaps angling their notepad toward the interviewer, transforming the dynamic from an adversarial interrogation into a collaborative side-by-side problem-solving session.
That's a great psychological trick.
It works perfectly.
Wow.
You say, to understand why our profits are shrinking, we logically must isolate the variable. We need to look at our revenue streams and our cost structures. Do we have any historical data indicating which of these two branches has shifted most dramatically in the last 3 quarters?
You are building the diagnostic machine in real time. But I want to ask about the ultimate outcome of this exercise. Let's say a candidate builds a beautiful, logical structure. They ask the right verification questions. Halfway through the math, they drop a 0, go down the wrong branch of the logic tree, and arrive at the completely wrong conclusion at the end of the 45 minutes. Do they still get the job?
Very often, yes. And this is perhaps the most counterintuitive yet revealing aspect of the entire global consulting apparatus. These firms value predictable process vastly more than they value lucky genius.
Explain that philosophy. Why would you hire the person who gave you the wrong answer?
Let's compare 2 candidates. Candidate A is a maverick. They hear the prompt, they stare at the ceiling for 2 minutes, they experience a flash of intuitive brilliance, and they blurt out the exact correct strategy.
Okay.
But they cannot retrace their steps. Their process was scattered, chaotic, and internal. The firm will reject candidate A.
Really? Even with the right answer?
Yes. Why? Because the firm operates on a global scale.
Yeah.
They cannot scale sudden flashes of intuition. They cannot put a chaotic maverick in front of a German banking CEO and just hope inspiration strikes. Luck is not repeatable.
But candidate B?
Candidate B uses a rigid, logical, data-driven framework. They draw the structure, they ask the probing questions, but at the very end, under the pressure of the clock, they miscalculate a percentage, leading to a flawed final recommendation. The firm will hire candidate B.
Because they can see the thought process.
Because a sound, rigid process is predictable. It is a machine that can be trusted. The firm knows they can easily train an analyst to double-check their arithmetic, but they cannot teach a chaotic mind to completely restructure its relationship with reality. They are hiring the architecture of the mind, not the final calculation.
Predictability lowers risk, and lowering risk is the core product these firms actually sell. But I have to ask about the long-term psychological toll of this training. If you spend 80 hours a week for years on end rigorously training your brain to instantly categorize every human interaction and global event into a mechanized framework of inputs, outputs, efficiencies, and bottlenecks, what does that actually do to a human being? Can they ever turn the machine off?
The blunt answer is no. You literally cannot unplug the analytical framework once it has been fully installed. The source material shares an anecdote about this unintended consequence that is both hilarious and deeply indicative of the psychological mutation that occurs. It is known in the lore as the cookie analysis.
I loved this part. The scene takes place at a McKinsey office meeting in New York. Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so it is a standard Friday office meeting. The consultants in the room are deeply overworked. They're sleeping 4 hours a night. They are highly stressed. And there's a pervasive grumbling that the firm is pushing them too hard without enough recovery time.
Everyone is exhausted.
Right. And the senior partner running the New York office is hosting an open Q&A session looking for feedback.
And a young consultant stands up to propose a solution to improve office morale.
He stands up in front of his peers and, with absolute deadpan seriousness, proposes that the firm should immediately remove all the free snacks, specifically the cookies and soft drinks from the New York office pantry.
Wait, to improve morale?
Yes. But because he's been entirely rewired by the firm, he doesn't just say, "I think sugar is bad for our stress levels." He delivers a rigorous, multi-tiered, quantitative analysis on the spot.
He builds a verbal logic tree about baked goods.
He does. He says, let's examine the data. There are approximately 1,000 employees operating out of this specific office. If we assume each person consumes just one free cookie per day at an average caloric density of 300 calories per cookie, we can calculate the impact.
Oh my God, he's doing the math.
He's doing the math. He goes, 300 calories multiplied by 1,000 employees multiplied by the 252 standard working days in a calendar year. That equates to over 45 million excess calories consumed in this office annually.
He is mathematically boiling down human comfort and a brief moment of joy into an annualized caloric expenditure liability.
It gets progressively more absurd. He continues to extrapolate. He says, based on the biological conversion rate of excess calories to fat, this caloric surplus guarantees that the average consultant in this office will gain approximately 2 pounds of body weight per year.
Where is he going with this?
He says, now, because McKinsey operates as a self-insured entity, this aggregate weight gain across the workforce will directly increase our cardiovascular and general healthcare costs. If we project this trend over a 10-year horizon, these free cookies will cost the firm an additional $2 million in medical liabilities.
$2 million in cookie-induced corporate liability. How did the head of the office react to this brilliant display of logic?
The senior partner reportedly just stared at him for a moment and replied, "Obviously, we are not keeping you busy enough."
That is incredibly funny, but it perfectly illustrates the central thesis, right? Their brains are fundamentally, permanently altered. Every input is run through the machine.
The speaker in the source explicitly admits that this cognitive rewiring makes consultants terrible social partners in everyday life. He describes the agonizing experience of being on a date, standing in line at a movie theater or a coffee shop, and being utterly incapable of just relaxing.
They can't just wait in line.
No, his brain automatically begins redesigning the queue process. He stands there thinking, if 100 people move through this choke point every hour, and we can shave 10 seconds off the transaction time by repositioning the register, we can increase total throughput by X% and reduce customer abandonment.
He is optimizing a coffee shop in his head while he is supposed to be engaging in a romantic evening.
Exactly. The framework becomes the inescapable default lens through which they process reality.
The machine never sleeps. But while that might ruin a Friday night date, there is a profound, almost primal power in possessing a muscle memory framework that automatically takes over when you are placed under extreme hostile stress. And I think this connects beautifully to the final and undoubtedly the most surprising tangent in the source material.
Yeah, the pivot here is really fascinating.
Because we have spent the entire deep dive discussing massive corporate ecosystems, billion-dollar mergers, elite educational pipelines, but the speaker suddenly pivots away from all of that to discuss a nonprofit charity called Kid Power.
It is a jarring pivot, but conceptually, it is the linchpin of the entire thesis. Kid Power is a global organization dedicated to training highly vulnerable populations, young children, the elderly, individuals with disabilities on how to physically and psychologically fend off attackers and predators.
Okay.
They operate on a highly leveraged, scalable model, setting up localized affiliate operations. For example, establishing a $5,000 training hub in Vietnam to eventually train over 1 million people globally.
But the obvious question is, why on earth is a high-level management consultant devoting time to a child safety charity in the middle of a cutthroat masterclass on corporate interviewing? What is the connective tissue?
The connective tissue is the methodology of instruction. It is how kid power teaches survival. They do not sit children in a classroom and give them an abstract 20-page lecture about the statistical dangers of strangers.
Because kids wouldn't absorb that.
Exactly. They utilize teaching by doing.
Yeah.
They use intense, visceral, highly repetitive physical role-playing. They take the conceptual framework of self-defense and drill it into the child's central nervous system until it becomes pure muscle memory.
And the real-world results of that specific methodology are nothing short of staggering. The source provides a few examples that are hard to forget.
They are chilling examples of the power of internalized process. In one instance, a 7-year-old girl takes a single kid power class. Over a year later, she is walking alone at a zoo and is physically grabbed by a predator.
Oh, wow.
She instantly executes the precise vocal and physical techniques she role-played. She escapes, not because she consciously remembered a lecture, but because her body instantly knew what to do when the panic hit. There was another case of a teenager who successfully fought off a kidnapper 2 full years after undergoing the training.
But the most incredible narrative, the one that really brings this entire analysis full circle, is the story of the 10-year-old girl and the baseball bat. Walk us through the mechanics of that event.
This one is wild. A young girl takes one single kid power role-playing class when she's 10 years old. She receives no subsequent follow-up training. 13 years later, she is a young adult walking in a secluded wooded area with her boyfriend.
So she's 23 at this point.
Yes, and without warning, they are ambushed by a deeply disturbed, disgruntled former employee of the boyfriend. The attacker charges them, wielding a baseball bat.
It is the ultimate high-stakes, maximum adrenaline scenario. How does the boyfriend react?
The boyfriend experiences a total cognitive collapse. He freezes. His amygdala floods his brain with cortisol and adrenaline, and because he possesses no pre-installed framework for navigating a sudden, lethal, blunt force attack, his conscious brain simply shuts down. He is paralyzed by the vacuum of information.
But the young woman who hasn't thought about that class in over a decade.
The young woman, 13 full years after a single afternoon of intense, framework-driven role-playing, steps directly into the line of fire. Her muscle memory completely bypasses her conscious panic. She executes the exact sequence she was taught as a child, neutralizes the attacker, and both she and her boyfriend walk out of those woods alive.
It is an incredible story of survival. But to pull all the threads together, how does surviving a lethal ambush in the woods fundamentally connect to surviving a $200 million corporate crisis in a boardroom in Cleveland?
They are biologically and structurally the exact same phenomenon. The synthesis is the human physiological response to a sudden vacuum of information under conditions of extreme stress.
Okay, break that down.
When that 67-year-old CEO stares at you across the mahogany table, microphones on, and demands an instantaneous solution to a plunging global profit margin, your adrenaline spikes exactly as if you were being attacked. Your conscious brain attempts to freeze, just like the boyfriend in the woods.
You blank out. The data swims in front of your eyes.
You completely blank out. But if you have rigorously internalized a step-by-step framework, if you have role-played the stall, verify, structure sequence 50 times in your living room before you ever step foot in the interview, your muscle memory takes over.
You fall back on your training.
You do not have to rely on a flash of lucky genius to invent a solution in the moment. You do not have to think at all. You just execute the framework. The framework is the net that catches you when your conscious mind falls.
That is a profound realization. I mean, the world of elite, high-level management consulting is not merely a test of raw, unadulterated computational intelligence. It is a test of extreme emotional and structural discipline. It is about possessing the sheer capacity to remain calm and process-oriented in a total information vacuum.
Absolutely.
It is about navigating the massive egos of veteran executives without triggering their defensive tripwires. And fundamentally, it is about building and ruthlessly relying on repeatable structural systems for survival rather than hoping for a momentary flash of brilliance.
It is the ultimate engineered triumph of process over panic. The people who run the world are not necessarily the smartest people in the room. They are the people with the most reliable frameworks.
If you found this breakdown of the hidden structures of elite decision-making and global corporate power insightful, make sure to subscribe to the Deep Dive. We are constantly pulling back the curtain on the invisible frameworks that shape our world, our economies, and our minds. Liking this deep dive and sharing it with someone who values deep analytical thinking really makes it possible for us to keep doing exactly this.
Yeah, there's always a deeper layer to the systems we take for granted.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenging, perhaps uncomfortable question to mull over. We have just spent the last hour dissecting how elite decision makers demand precise, data driven justification for every single move, while simultaneously refusing to exhaust their resources trying to boil the ocean. I want you to look at the massive decisions you are facing in your own life, your career, or your business right now. Look honestly at your own process. Are you operating on a clear, actionable, minimum viable framework? Or are you paralyzing yourself, staring at the water, trying to boil the ocean?